Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the future of insurance and generative AI. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. In today's webinar, our speakers will be discussing how generative AI technology is expected to revolutionize the insurance industry. Throughout the webinar, please ensure to remain on mute. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A chat box, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. We'll be running a Q&A at the end of the webinar to answer all of your questions. And if you miss anything, don't worry, we'll be sending around the on-demand recording when it's available. So without further ado, let me introduce you to today's speakers. We are joined by Emphasys Technology, AI, Domain, and Experience Specialist, Rekha, Fani, Dr. Archie, Aditya, Patrick, and Sixfold CEO, Alex. To get started, let me go ahead and hand it over to Fani.
Thanks, Cecilia. Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to cover broadly three topics. One, a quick overview of what is happening in the generative AI landscape, what the buzz is all about, and then we will also talk about a big announcement we made around Emphasys.ai, a new business unit we launched. We are then going to talk about how generative AI and GPT is going to impact the day in life of various personas in the insurance organizations. To make it relevant, we picked up three personas: an insurance agent and broker, so one of your clients; an underwriter, an extremely important role in the insurance organization; and an IT developer who is actually supporting every application to be built. Then we'll cover some of the important things we are doing in our research lab on taking the available technologies and make it relevant for your enterprise so you can safely adopt it. At the end, we'll take some Q&A, but keep the conversation going on the Q&A chat window. So what is happening with this generative AI technology? Ever since OpenAI made an announcement roughly around Thanksgiving, it became a topic. And interestingly, it was the topic at the Thanksgiving dinner tables, ChatGPT. It's something revolutionary technology that just came around. While AI has been there for several years now, it did not take a broader adoption and impacted the day-to-day life. However, since then, in the last 5 months, there hardly hasn't been a day where there hasn't been an announcement by somebody either in the technology industry or even from different bodies such as regulators and conversations. So this has become a C-suite conversation. It is no longer just a CIO conversation. You may have seen the big announcements that are made by the technology companies like Microsoft, which not just invested in AI, but made AI their bet. Every technology that Microsoft offers has now an AI element, including ones from Windows. There's a Copilot, all the way into the entire cloud technology like Azure. And others have quickly followed suit. Many big announcements came from the likes of the Google in their I/O conference, including things that we use every day, like Google Pictures or your Android phones. So AI, particularly generative AI, has entered into almost everybody's life, whether they are realizing it or not. Very recently, some of you may have seen this, but we made a big launch on a business unit, Emphasys.ai. The sole purpose of this business unit is to take the technology that is made available in terms of these large language models, reasoning models, foundation models, and work with partners, not just the big partners like the likes of the hyperscalers, but specialist partners like Core.ai, which has specialty in cognitive technologies, all the way to industry-leading vertical partners like Sixfold, who are here with us. Build assets on top of it, including AI models, including data sets that are already curated and trained and address specific problems in in your organizations through a number of offerings, from advisory all the way to prepping the data and building AI applications. Before we do that, there has been a lot of buzz, as I said. So we'll spend a few minutes to look at what the industry analysts have said. Gartner came out with an early study of roughly 2,500 execs that they interviewed, that generative AI has an immediate and most impactful on customer experience, customer retention, direct impact on your top line, the revenue growth, on your bottom line, your cost optimization, and bring things around your business continuity, your security posture, etc. And it has a big impact at a much greater level. For example, if you look at what Goldman has announced, this has an impact to increase the global GDP by 7% in the next decade. That's massive. And it is impacting every part of what we do, from where the content gets generated, right? It is text, it is images, it's videos, it's code. There's an impact in every part where the content gets created, previously by humans, previously by machines, and now this has become the sole purpose of generative AI, to create content and support the areas where humans would have been spending a lot of time. Not just the analysts, we're also seeing organizations that are already at the forefront of this big wave, starting to adopt, starting to research in their labs. Organizations that are trying to figure out, now, how do I bring these technology and make it relevant in the current business workflows, human workflows? How does it impact various aspects of my insurance value chain, from sales to servicing to underwriting and claims? And organizations are quickly realizing that the limit is so high that it's us, our ability to phantom rationalize these and utilize it, all the way to see how can I take advantage of the investments that we have made in terms of building intranet portals, building knowledge management, document management repositories. Can this technology like a ChatGPT be brought into the enterprises and be fed with all these huge knowledge sources so that it can immediately become relevant to the organizations?
That was a lot that you spoke, Funny. And this is Rekha. I represent looking at experiences for users, which are our end customers, users who are our internal employees. For us, it's very important to focus on what is the impact that generative AI is going to have on the experiences of each one of us. And when we mapped the complete value chain in the insurance domain, from product management till whatever happens in the back office, and there are some loops, obviously it's not so linear, but we started identifying various areas and use cases where, starting from the product factory till the end of risk and compliance, AI, just artificial intelligence, is going to impact, on some of these use cases. And those use cases which are highlighted in blue here, and I'll call out some of them specifically. So when we are talking about customer engagement, there will be opportunities to be able to automate customer communications, improve the interactions, do sentiment analysis, do the predictions based on them, look at the CSAT scores, and be able to better service our customers based on the input that generative AI will produce. There will be opportunities to upscale business through upselling, cross-selling products based on real-time conversations. When it comes to underwriting, and we'll have Alex talk about it a little later, it's about looking at those large amounts of unstructured data, whether it's in the form of customer reviews, social media posts, news articles, third-party data, etc., which takes a human, an underwriter, to go, it takes him or her so much time to go through so many documents. This is getting processed so much faster with the use of generative AI, and then intelligent document processing. But if I continue to look at the areas of policy servicing and everything back office, there are many more use cases that are going to come in. The analysis is going to become far faster. You will be able to capture the fraud through claim fraud analytics in a faster manner. So this is where experiences for each one of us in whatever role that you and I are playing in our organizations is going to have an impact. And Funny has spoken so much about the technology. We are now looking at the overall value chain within which sit multiple processes. And I am bringing to this presentation some of our users, our personas, who are going to take us through their experience with the use of generative AI and how using generative AI, it truly changes for them and expedites what they typically take hours to do, but can be done so much faster in a more expedited manner. And there is value in bringing that in because we are becoming more efficient. We are looking at our own experiences getting enhanced. We are becoming more productive to be able to then spend time on many other things which could be of more business value. So over to Aditya. He's our insurance agent, and Aditya is going to talk about, what he does in his daily life and how generative AI helps him.
Thank you, Rekha. So as Funny and Rekha outlined, the day in life of an insurance agent, I actually care for my client relationships. And I focus on offering my clients a wide spectrum of financial protection and investment products, making sure that their journey of policy purchase and policy service, is actually with a high customer satisfaction, as well as making sure that, their interaction with us is of a high CSAT, higher NPS, and making sure that they are happy with the insurance products that I sell. We'll go through the life of me using my daily tools. This is my typical single pane of glass. It's a life insurance digital agency solution that I'm using. And my job is to make sure that I look at my task list, I complete my codes, I follow the requirements, interact with underwriters, making sure that everything is actually moving in the right direction. This is a typical single pane of glass. What you see in my workspace is recently closed policy. On the right-hand side, I have certain tools to sell my products more effectively. But most importantly, you will see broker assistance in the end on the right-hand corner. That's the one I want to focus and talk about today, right? And that's the a chatbot assistant that is co-pilot for doing my job better. And it is enabled by GPT. So we'll talk about a typical quote process, which is actually what you see on the screen. I'm actually generating a quote for one of my prospect who's actually buying a life insurance product for his son. And, during the consultation, we determined that term life product is the right product for him and his child. And that's what I'm generating a quote for. Now, obviously, this is a standard process. And I also know that during the sales cycle, my clients actually typically work with 2 or 3 different carriers to see if they are getting the most cost-effective quote. So I'm aware of the shopping cycle that they go through. I want to make sure that, I understand my competitors' products well as well. In a pre-GPT world, what that means is, going through 60, 70 pages of product brochures of multiple competitors. And many times the differences are in riders and, all policies are not created equal. So clearly, you would not know what is the real value for my clients. Here, I'm selecting some comprehensive coverage, multiple riders for the term life insurance policy that I'm trying to sell, which is, my LIDA term life product, also known as Washington National, my current carrier that I'm placing the business for. Now, clearly, I presented a quote to my client, and next thing I know, next day he comes and basically says that, well, I'm actually getting a better quote with Georgia Mutual. So I'm actually asking now broker assistants, my co-pilot, enabled by GPT, and asking some questions. I want to make sure that all my answers are actually providing me the key information I'm looking for. Right now, I asked the question on the key features of my policy, just list all the different riders, different different risk classes that Georgia Mutual actually has, right? So that's the first question. Now I'm asking, what is my policy? What riders do I cover? And just being aware for my conversation, right? That's what I'm doing. It's giving me a list of my riders. And now, again, I want to understand where the differences are. I'm not going to go through 70 pages and spend half an hour looking for the differences. So here is it's telling me that, the Washington National Life, it differs. As you can see, it differs. There's a terminal illness rider in the policy I have sold versus Georgia Mutual doesn't have it. And that's where the magic happens. That's a big moment for me, moment of truth, which is what I'm going to communicate to my client and letting him know that what you are getting doesn't have terminal illness rider. It's a living benefit, which is a big feature. In the case of terminal illness, you can actually advance your death benefits. And that's where the value of my policy is. And right? I close the sale and it basically makes my day better. Now I actually have extra time to play golf with my clients. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you, Aditya. Well, I'm Alex, and I'm playing the role today of an insurance underwriter. And I sit on the other side of that transaction that you just saw presented when the business comes in from a broker. So my daily life essentially consists of receiving many submissions from so many different brokers and agents in many different lines of insurance. I'm going to specifically focus today on the work that I do in property and casualty insurance, which involves first understanding what a business is, how do we classify them, then frequently involves looking through hundreds of pages of documentation on that business. Sometimes it's sent over by the broker, sometimes I go out to third-party data sources. And ultimately, my goal is to get more premium written for the carrier that I work for and to make the brokers and agents that reach out to me feel great and to develop a relationship and meet the prices and meet the coverages that they're looking for their customers. So I'm going to show you a bit right now of what the day in the life looks like. Before I was assisted by generative AI, I'll show you what my day used to be like. Essentially, I would come in on a Monday morning, or really any day of the week, and my inbox is inundated with emails, submissions from all the brokers that I do business with, that maybe they have a relationship with me, maybe they don't, they're just sending me a piece of business for the first time. And what I have to do, what I'm forced to do, is actually look through each and every submission to figure out if it's even the right kind of insurance or if it's the right thing that we want to offer. So I open each submission and I spend a little bit of time. Do I recognize the broker? Is this the right kind of business? And I go back and forth until I finally find the one submission that is right for me. And then actually my work begins. I, as well as my underwriting team, the first thing we do is we have to classify this business. So we use one of the business databases. It's the NAICS database. And we say, what kind of business is it? Are they a painter or a plumber or a restaurant? And then I and my team, we go out to Google and we search LexisNexis and OSHA and Facebook. And the list just keeps getting longer and longer. Our chief underwriting officer keeps wanting us to look at more and more data sources to be certain that we understand this risk. And then ultimately, I have back and forth with the broker. I make sure that they really classified the business correctly. And it's a somewhat long and exhausting process. Now, this is what the world looks like when I add my generative AI assistant that I work with, which in this case happens to be Sixfold. What Sixfold does is it automatically looks through all of my submissions. And it tells me based on my underwriting criteria, what my chief underwriter officer's manual is, this is the one that you should work on first, Alex. So I pull it open, and right there already, the AI assistant has gone out to all of these different data sources and has captured the data, and it starts giving me a summary. It tells me, I think this is the class code. I think this is the rating. These are their prior losses. It cuts out so much of the back and forth. Maybe I have a question or two with the broker, and ultimately we get the policy written to the customer that much more quickly. Now, to see this in action, the way it works is I log into my dashboard, and I interface with this, and I upload spreadsheets, and I have this great experience. But I'm just going to show you a couple of the tools that I can use. So let's say I want to understand how is a business classified. Well, I could come in here, and previously I used to have to go to their website. Now I could just come in here, type in their website address, and you'll see what the AI assistant does is it instantly spiders as many pages on the site as I want. It brings me back a description of the business. So I now understand, okay, in this case, the Gaga Center is, well, it looks like a kid's sports business on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. More importantly, it starts telling me 3 guesses at what it thinks the business code is. Well, it's maybe a this, maybe it's a that, maybe it's a this. And the really important thing is it gives me the reason why. It gives me confidence that this is a good guess. The other thing I could do is I could look up the prior losses for this company. So I'm just going to put in a test federal identification number, and it went out to a workers' comp database, and it's helping me to underwrite. And it comes back and it tells me, here are the prior losses. Here's how you should think about it. It also tells me something really cool, which previously I used to have to do as a human. If you look here, it tells me the class codes for this business may not match their name, because the name of the business is, I don't know, Lawnmower and Sushi and Rex's Dinosaurs. But the class codes say that it's a clerical office. Something is mismatched here. And finally, I can get really deep with my analysis. So I can look up in a permits database. Does this company participate in solar, electrical, or roofing? And quickly get back, no, they don't do solar, they don't do roofing, but they do electrical, and here's the reasons why. It saves me time, it allows me to get through many more cases, and ultimately, the metric by which I'm judged is how much premium I write. On now to the developer experience to see what it's like to actually build these things.
Hello, everyone. I'm Patrick. I'm a software developer, and I work on creating application and software solutions for an insurance organization. Through several examples, you will discover on how generative AI can help me in my daily engineering task. During this demo, you will meet 3 of my colleagues. Can you please pause, recap? Cody, a chat assistant from SourceGraph, Code Whisperer, an inline autocompletion wingman from AWS, and also Orpheus, our own Emphasys assistant, leveraging open source large language models and additional training on our private code repository. So let's go through the different demos. The first example, we will use, you can play. We will use the previous portal that you have seen, and in fact, we will update the existing code. As you can see, in fact, the form is checking only for non-empty field of this form. And in fact, we want to validate the username as an email. So first of all, I will go to my IDE and ask my assistant, Cody, to find me where is the login component in all the files that is making the project. So it will tell me exactly what is this location. So then I can go to open this file to see what this component is looking like. There I can see the code. And in fact, I want to update this code to not validate for an empty username field, but I want to ensure that username is an email type. So I will just type this in plain English to my assistant. And the assistant, in fact, will analyze the file And we see also that some libraries are used to do some validation. So this one is a typical JavaScript library, and it will propose me what I need to change. So it will take even the same function name and update the code to validate the username as an email. Once this is done, let's try it out on the portal, and we can see indeed that now, if I'm starting to type my first name, it will complain and say that it must be a valid name. Another typical use case of AI coding assistant is code suggestion while typing. So instead, in fact, of asking my assistant to do the code for me, I'm a big guy, so I will do it myself. I will start to type the validation email function. And as you can see, while I'm typing, there are some auto-suggestion that is done. So validate email, then it will suggest that, okay, it needs to have an email input, and then it will propose what this function should look like and write the regular expression that will validate this input. Now, another typical use case in my journey is to understand the code. So, okay, when I'm looking at what the suggestion has proposed, I mean, it's quite complex. It's a lot of sign in this regular expression. So let's ask Cody to explain, in fact, the code in detail to understand what it's doing. And as we can see, in fact, the assistant will analyze this and will propose you that, okay, this is a function to validate an email, that this regex indeed is validating email address. So we are all good on this. Apart from code generation, assistant can also provide helpful, in fact, another typical use case is to generate code, but for existing API. So let's say that there is an existing API that is displayed here and that is represented by Swagger or OpenAPI spec. And we'll ask the assistant, based on this spec, to generate a call to retrieve all the users. So if it's finding that, okay, you need to use the get users operations, and this is the code. This is quite simple because there is no real parameters there. So let's try to make it a little bit harder and let's ask him to generate the code for creating a user. So let's type this in plain English, submitting, and then it will propose some code that is leveraging indeed the right method, that is a post on /users. But when we are looking at the specification, we can see that, in fact, the object that need to be passed, so the parameters, are not the right ones. So we will just tell the assistant that it should refer to this create user object, and so it will automatically update its answers and use these correct properties, in fact, in the proposed code, as we can see in its answer. And here we have all the different properties that are needed. So another one is, in fact, to help in creating queries for different tables in the database. So let's say I'm not a good developer, I'm not good at generating queries. So here is, in fact, the script to create a table for cars, for user, and there is a relationship between cars and user. In fact, I want to retrieve all the cars on the owners to which it belongs. So I will write in plain English in our Emphasys Orpheus assistant to help me generate this SQL query. And we can see at the bottom right that it has generated this select username, last name, and it has done the typical join that is needed to retrieve all of that. A good use case also, it's code review. So typically you, as a developer, you sometimes are just jumping on application that you don't really have developed yourself. and you need some explanation, I will say, or to understand if the code is well written and so on. So typically, we are doing a code smell with our assistant. It will highlight us if there is any security issue, if some code should be written differently because there are maybe issues in the code, or we are getting, like in this one, some multiple lines, and we just need to retrieve one. And also, we can, with this kind of assistant, generate unit tests. So that's quite helpful because usually it's quite the white page syndrome. So we have our code, and then we go to it. We ask to generate a unit test, and the assistant will analyze the code and generate typically a unit test for this code. And like you see, in fact, as it's interacting with the database, it has even inserted a test value in it. So this was, in fact, the last example that I wanted to showcase today. As you can see with these 7 use cases, generative AI assistant can already help in many engineering phases, and for sure it will evolve and specialize even more in the near future.
Wow, that's a lot of use cases and an interesting demonstration. So as you can see, similar to the insurance value stream, we are now looking at the impact, the positive impact of generative AI and its corresponding technologies across the IT value stream. So today, in its current form, we are seeing how would my current software development lifecycle is going to be impacted. But we could imagine a new version of software development lifecycle where it doesn't follow this path anymore. There could be many things that can start getting eliminated because now I have new assistants, new intelligent developers like Cody and Code Whisperer, who can make the life of the entire IT team productive. However, there are a number of challenges to solve right now. How do I bring it along with my human workflows? How do I ensure the IT organizational standards that I have set up are still relevant and these technologies follow it? How do I keep the cost of adoption so that my IT budgets don't blow up? How do I make sure that the data that is very, very important and sensitive to my organization remains private, that doesn't leak into the World Wide Web? And lastly is, if any of these assistants doesn't have an answer, how do I make sure they are not coming up or making up what is we call as hallucination? So there are a number of challenges that need to be addressed, and we are constantly addressing them. On the other hand, a number of my tech partners, the hyperscalers and others, are already launching their stack. Like there's a Copilot stack, which I now can use to build orchestration layers and plugins in my existing applications. Then there are services that are now made available, cloud services for me to take advantage of already pre-trained fundamental models that I can use and now make it very specific to my use cases. I can change the way my entire customer relationship is managed with things like Einstein.ai. So here's a scenario. This is a claims scenario where I have already built my entire solution using the best stack that is available to me at that point, where I can take an entire claims that are coming in and all the corresponding documents. I have used the best AI technologies, machine learning modules like TextTrack Service, Comprehend, and SageMaker to make sure that I am taking advantage of them, inputting into the process, extracting the value, and putting into the right queue. So my claims adjusters have all the necessary information to make the decision, to do the adjudication, and look at SOPs. So I already got a lot of efficiency in my claims process. But now with the generative AI and new services that are available to me, I can bring the foundation models that are available to me into this entire workflow. I can take advantage of new services like Amazon Titan. And now, whatever the manual adjudication my claims adjusters were doing, can be further optimized and automated. Therefore, the reasoning and the need to look up the thousands of pages of the standard operating procedures and look at their entire knowledge models to make the decisions can be done much faster. To the extent that all the explanation of benefits that need to be generated can be much more humanized. To the example that Aditya said, when a claim gets denied, it's a bad news to give to your customer. But can I use technologies like these to make it smoother and keep my operations better? So here's an example of how I can bring these new generative AI technologies and the services into my existing, already modernized workflows.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Fanny. Hi, everyone. As you saw through the webinar, right, generative AI is providing a large number of really amazing opportunities. There are new methods to address business challenges, as you saw, and also there are a lot of challenges that this is throwing up, as Fanny mentioned. So I'm Archie from Next Labs, and for the next couple of minutes, I will walk you through a few of the research areas that we are focusing on in relation to generative AI. The first and foremost is identifying new business processes and business process enablers. In fact, we had run an ideathon some time ago in Emphasys, and we got a number of really interesting ideas. Some of these ideas centered around question and answer systems for very specific domains around insurance, wealth, medtech, so many different domains. And there's something called retrieval augmented generation, which was heavily leveraged. In fact, we got to some really interesting topics, including some on container orchestration and automations in those areas as well. In fact, the holy grail here is not just to reimagine business processes, but reimagine entire businesses. Now that you have AI, which is available to you, how do you really start reimagining? The second pillar, as you saw in a couple of demos, centers around how do we deliver our services better? What kind of boost do you get as an underwriter, as a developer? Some of these you saw, right? Some of these are directly used out of the box. But can we fine tune these models? Can we make them really context specific? Can we make them, follow our coding standards or whatever coding conventions that you have? Can LLM outputs really be trained on those directions? So those are some of the research areas when it comes to productivity boosters. The third area is something which is loosely called the LLM ops. So it's like LLM plus ML ops. But some of the really interesting areas include prompt optimization, fine-tuning of LLM models, as well as synthetic data generation, federated learning, and many more interesting areas, ultimately culminating in how do we evaluate these models, right? Do we move beyond the subjective evaluations of this model is good versus that model is bad? How do you actually go ahead and select these different models? So all of these come under the area for LLM ops. And finally, one of the challenges thrown out is around AI governance. So there are issues around ethics, fairness, bias, also attribution in cases you are using data. What data were these models trained on? Is my data leaking, right? A lot of those challenges we just heard a little while ago. And then there is this specific term, hallucination, like Fanny mentioned a little while earlier. How do I control against all of this? In the next slide, we will talk about a sample LLM workflow to demonstrate these research areas and how they are actually impacting a typical LLM workflow. So we've taken one particular it's not a use case, but it's a typical LLM workflow. There is a user who will submit a query. And the first thing when it comes to optimizing is actually planning out the tasks. So here we would go ahead and we would do things like multi-step reasoning. Can we break it down? Can we use things like LangChain or API chain? What all are the different methods that you can go ahead so that these tasks are distributed to appropriate agents? So that's the first step in optimizing these prompts. Once that roles or those tasks are defined, you go ahead and do further prompt engineering and optimization. And one of and a couple of key steps here include identifying the agents, or as it's called, the agent routing part of it. And then a lot of knowledge embedding. Like we talked about hallucinations, in many of the cases, you would want your models to be restricted to certain data sets. And that's where getting your knowledge base and vectorizing them and then giving those only as context to the prompts become really useful. And one method which is being tried very often now. The last part of it is auto prompting. And this is where you look at historical prompts and historical interactions that you have. And can we now go ahead and do different things, right? Can we learn from those promptings to do things like soft prompting, meta prompting, so on and so forth? Right. So those are some of the areas through which you can get a prompt engineered and an optimized prompt. And all of these are, very emerging research areas. What you get at the end of the day from this is that from that user input, you now have specific agents, specific tasks which have been given, and specific prompts which are very contextualized. So these are prompts with context that you can actually send to LLM models. Now that brings us to the next question. Which LLM model, right? So many out there. There are open source versions, some which perform fast, some which perform good, so on. So which one should I go ahead and select? And that is where LLM model selection and LLM model fine tuning become very critical aspects. A lot of very emergent area here. How do I go ahead and train them? What does it learn? How do I test these models, right? One option is actually to go ahead and create checkpoint at almost every stage and then go ahead and do the testing. Either way, that's how you come to a very fine-tuned model or a model that you want to select and run. And now that you have your prompt and you have your model, you still need to evaluate. There are the standard task-specific evaluations that you have been doing for any AI application. But here, there are a whole set of new applications, including figuring out whether there is consistency in terms of the facts which are presented. So these are some additional checks which come in when it comes to the LLM model outputs. And this is the validated output, which can then go into either a micro app, which will sit as a layer between your prompt and the methods, or it could just directly be given to the system users. So that is a typical example of an LLM workflow and the areas we are working on. I'll also like to, before I go on, right, just talk about a couple of challenges in the next slide. You might have seen a few of this, right, as motivating examples of things that are just still very open. For example, there was a law case, right? And many of you might have read about this. And this was riddled, right? The brief which the lawyer actually asked ChatGPT to go ahead and submit was riddled with fake citations. And they looked so real. Varghese versus China Southern Airlines, Martinez versus Delta Airlines, so on and so forth. That it was almost impossible for someone to go ahead and figure out, is this real or is this fake? And all of this is hallucination. That's one thread. The other thread is around AGI. And here is Sam Altman himself talking about the different challenges which are posed by AGI. Finally, as a response to this, a lot of countries are creating guardrails. We have these guardrails, as we see in the next slide, in US as well as in Europe, right? Many regulations coming up, and with that may be funny, I will hand it over to you to talk through the last sections. Thank you.
So all these challenges, again, are not trivial, right? Right from understanding the foundation models, which one to write, which technology provider is giving the best one for me to adopt, where do I train this, how do I get the right data sets, what library should I use, all of these, and which use cases to solve. So as part of the Emphasys.ai, our objective is to bring these technologies and the best emerging use cases quickly. And we have divided and identified several archetypes where we see the immediate applicability beyond the demonstrations, what you have seen. For example, we partnered with the company Core.ai, which is very focused on building cognitive bots powered by generative AI, which could be brought into things like your contact center, where there is a lot of human interaction that is happening, all the way to your business operations, be it claims, be it underwriting operations, or your IT ops, be it your application support, be it your application maintenance. So the examples that you have seen throughout the demos are now brought into these archetypes. And all the services that we have launched is to help that, to rethink how applications can be developed with AI mindset, similar to what you have seen the agent's scenario of a GPT assisting the agent to be more better, or an underwriter who no longer have to look and score through a number of data sources. Identifying use cases through hackathons, prep the data, but most importantly, also look at factuality and address the scenarios that Archie talked about in terms of hallucination. All of this is now something that we are able to offer along with our partners. For example, what Alex showed about the underwriter experience with Sixfold. So with that, we want to open to Q&A, see what questions you have, ideas, thoughts that you would want us to address. I had received one direct question. Let me start with that. Is given the advent of all these technologies that are being offered, how would you build them into your development methodologies, your DevSecOps cycles? So one of the way is to start inspecting your current workflow, see what tools you're using. For example, if you have paired programming as your standard norm or mob programming, can you start introducing a new AI programmer like Cody to start trying out the responses that they give, so that you can slowly introduce that into your application development environment? Similarly, if you have a lot of work happening on the performance and SRE, there are things that can be now fed to these models to better assist in identifying the patterns of your applications to see where the potential pitfalls are and can start addressing that. So again, there are interesting ideas that you are trying. We are very open to come and discuss that with you. Archie, Patrick, Rekha, did any of you get any questions too?
No.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any questions coming in, so I'm gonna go ahead and we'll end the chat for today. Just want to thank all of our speakers today, and thank you for the audience. If you have any questions, we have an email up on the screen. You can go ahead and drop an email. And we will be sending around today's presentation within the next 24 hours. Thank you everyone for joining.